More now on the president's trip to India. Let's bring in Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House and a Fox News contributor. Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning. How are you?
Fantastic. We've been covering this for 2 days now. The president's still in a state dinner with the First Lady. We'll be heading back to the White House shortly. We've been talking about it in the context of a president who faces critics all the time saying America is weaker on his watch and that he is not respected on the world stage. And instead, it seems like we've seen something much different play out over the last 2 days.
Well, look, I think the president has done a brilliant job of communicating again and again that he can go around the world. He and Modi, the head of India, obviously are very similar in they're both entrepreneurial personalities. To get off the airplane and go to a stadium with 120,000 happy people, it would seem to me for most of Trump's critics that had to at least slow down their assumption about whether or not he's acceptable. The fact is that the president is an enormous figure around the world. He represents the most powerful nation in the world. And people have, I think, gradually over the last 3 years come to respect both how tough he is, but also how much he wants to reach out and to expect the other country to also be tough. Trump isn't for a one-sided American nationalism. He's for representing American interest and assuming, for example, that Modi will represent India's interest or that Xi Jinping will represent China's interest, but that ought to be a tough, direct, honest negotiation. And of course, almost everywhere he goes, the president's a salesman, so he brings back $3 billion in contracts for helicopters. Not bad for a day's work.
Yeah, and to your point about negotiations, the president referring to intense negotiations with his friend, Prime Minister Modi, on a broader trade agreement, because as you suggest, this is not just something he's going to bring back one-sided. He knows this is a give and take.
Right, and India's had a long history of being an extraordinarily protectionist country. It goes all the way back to the founding of India after World War II as a country. And so getting them to start to dismantle some of their tariff and regulatory things is very difficult. It's a great challenge. It's something that Prime Minister Modi really wants to do if he can. He was a brilliant leader of the province, the state of Gujarat, and really helped raise the tremendous high technology economy in that state. He'd like to be able to do that for all of India, and he knows that requires him to lower the tariffs and to deregulate.
But during this news conference, though, obviously domestic politics coming up, in particular this case before the Supreme Court about whether the government can deny visas to non-citizens entering the U.S. The president fired up about Justice Sonia Sotomayor's dissent, where she wrote in part, quote, "It is hard to say what is more troubling, that the government would seek this extraordinary relief seemingly as a matter of course," she wrote, "or that the court would grant it." The president lashing out at both Justice Sotomayor as well as Justice Ginsburg, who you saw in that photo, who going back to 2016 called the president a faker. She later apologized for that. What do you think about the president saying it's time for some of these justices to recuse themselves?
Look, presidents are allowed to have strong opinions. President Franklin D. Roosevelt tried to pack the court by adding a whole bunch of extra justices because he was so mad at the court for blocking parts of the New Deal. So it's not unusual for presidents to not always be happy with the Supreme Court. This president's already added 2 justices. I suspect if he gets reelected, he'll add another couple justices in his second term. He will leave behind a court much more conservative than it would have been if Hillary Clinton had won or if Bernie Sanders wins. So I think he'll eventually get there. But Trump, I've never seen a president more dedicated to the principle that he's allowed to speak his mind as though he is a normal citizen, which of course he's not. He is the president of the United States. But there's no rule that says you can't have your own opinion. And, I think Dwight Eisenhower said that appointing Chief Justice Earl Warren was probably the biggest mistake of his presidency. So I think people are allowed to have strong opinions.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I have 1 minute left, but before the president can nominate more people to the Supreme Court in a second term, he obviously needs to get reelected, something he's intently focused on right now. That prospect more likely now, you believe, when you have Bernie Sanders as the front runner for the Democrats and doubling down, maybe tripling down on his support for Fidel Castro?
Well, sure. Look, I think Sanders is such a radical that he may well take down the Democratic House and cost the Democrat seats in the Senate, much like, say, George McGovern did in '72. The president's greatest challenge right now, though, is to look at the impact of the coronavirus on the Chinese economy and through the Chinese economy on the American economy, because he can't run as the jobs president if we end up in a downward spiral pulled by the Chinese, the Chinese economy is shattering right now. And it's the second biggest in the world. So the president has to focus very much on what do we need to do to keep America growing no matter what happens in China.
And there's been a lack of transparency from the beginning of this coming out of China, as you suggest, in terms of how deep this crisis may be. Mr. Speaker, we appreciate you and your insights this morning. Thank you, sir.